guys, Ken here, your Thrifty Apprentice, and welcome back to another Thrifty Review. In today's quick review, we are going to be taking a look at the Miya 36 solid watercolor diamond palette. I picked this up off Amazon. Now, before I get into this review, let me make a few things clear or say a few things. One, of course, you guys know I don't do paid reviews. Everything that I say in a review is based on my experience with the product after a week or two of testing and a couple of paintings, based on my painting style. So with that said, I don't do paid reviews and everything is completely my opinion. Nothing is sponsored. I picked it up off Amazon. Now this is going to be the first video in sort of a series that's attached to the review series of Where Are They Now palettes, or Where Are They Now paints. I've been doing some checking of some art supplies that I have in back stock, and I've noticed that some of them are currently unavailable. Now it is what it is on that, because I have them already. The downside to that is that these are palettes that I intended to review and share with you guys. So what I'm going to start doing in that case is naming the videos at the start of it, Where Are They Now, so that you'll be aware that what is about to be reviewed is a palette that is not currently in stock. Now, whether or not they will become available, I don't know. I do or am going to reach out to the manufacturers or the art suppliers before I do videos, in hopes that I'll have the information before the video is released or before I shoot it. As of right now, I have not acquired an answer to when these will be back in stock, but the video description will include a link so that you can check periodically on the product if you're interested in getting it after seeing the review. So now that that's all out of the way, let's jump into this. It comes in this little clear plastic container. Now, it has a lot of Chinese characters on the front. I am going to include translation in the video, so you should be able to see it as we go through this. So here we have the Miya 36 colors. These are solid watercolors. Now this little tag says Hemi watercolor painters, green. So now according to that tag, it's a part of the Hemi line. Flipping it over on the back, says Miya solid watercolors. Everything else is in Chinese, but I've kind of peeped at the translation, so I know a lot of it says that it's like their address, you know, the website, the fact that it does conform to all of the regulations that it needs to. I think it says that the paints are bright and vibrant on some part of it. Like down here is like mixable or something to that effect. But I am going to include the translation on the screen so that you'll be able to see it. Let's pop this on open. Inside the packaging, you get a pencil, which I really love how cute their pencils are. Now they are domed, but it is a HB graphite pencil, and it looks pretty centered. All of the pencils that I've had from them before, I either give as gifts or I do use in my sketching, and they look pretty nice. I like them. And we're going to be looking at some other Hemi products, so we'll get a chance to see all that. So here inside we're getting a color swatch, but of course it's computer generated, so it's not going to give you the actual color of the paint, but it gives you a general idea of what each color is in the 3 individual sets, 12, 24, or 36. This happens to be the 36 diamond palette. Don't get it confused with the fact that they do produce another 36 count palette known as the 36 solid watercolor square kit. Now that is a different palette from this one, and I actually believe those paints are actually different paints, but we'll get into that a little bit later. You also get a swatch sheet that is included. It's on a watercolor paper. It says 300 gems, so it's a pretty robust paper. Has some nice texture to it. I don't know if it's 100% cotton. It may be. They do produce a 100% cotton paper. I did like the feel of this. It swatched pretty well. Now, I actually had my palette turned, what some people may call backwards, this way when I swatched the paints. So my swatch sheet runs corresponding to this way and opposed to, should I say, this way. So, you know, it is what it is. I wasn't really paying too much attention when I started to swatch them. All right, so you get this diamond paint, this diamond cut paint inside a plastic palette insert, okay? They are glued in. They are definitely machine cut in order to get that angle. And they are in a disposable plastic palette. You guys can see the back of that. You can actually see the glue dots there, but they're pretty thick. I would like to say that each one of those would definitely equal out to be about a half pan of paint. That's pretty cool. They do have a semi-moist texture to them after use, and that's even after a couple of days. And I did notice that a lot of Miya products have that similarity of texture to the paints after you've wet them for the first time. Now these held up a lot better than the last experience I had with a 36 count set from them, so I was really pleased with that particular point. The paints do not chip or crack from my experience, and as you can see, I've really dug into using that color that I think is the ultramarine, although I could be wrong, but no, I think that one is the ultramarine. So if you or when you use up all of the paints, you would have a palette that could be readily used to put other paints in, use as a pencil storage, maybe even to store brushes in for travel. That would be a really neat idea for this case. I think that is really, really neat. And it's 20 bucks or less, so when it's in stock, it's around that range. At least that's what I bought it for. So, you know, it's definitely worth the buy, if for no other reason that I really like that cool pencil case. But let's get into the paints themselves. So consistency, pretty good. Re-wet really, really well. Didn't have any issues with that. The paints are, let's see here. Let me grab the swatch sheet. The paints are pretty bright and vibrant. They have a really high pigment load payoff. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, they have a really high pigment load payoff. As I said, you don't have any issue with them re-wetting. They have flow. They do move. They don't move like, say, core moves. You know, our core just gushes all over the paper. They don't move like that, but they will move in a wet and wet wash. So I didn't have any issues with that, really depending on the paper. Not so much as like here on a mixed media paper, but more so on like a watercolor paper. Definitely a 100% watercolor paper, you'll have more movement of the paint, I believe, or in my opinion anyway. Now there's not a lot of coarseness in the paints. The paints are really consistent and flat. It would lead you to almost believe that they're maybe made up of dyes, but I don't believe that's the case. I'm thinking maybe the pigments in these paints are all kind of maybe milled to be the same consistency, to be the same way, so that the paints all kind of lay down flat and perform the same way, which is pretty cool. I mean, there's a little bit, I mean, a very little bit of texture in what I think is probably their version of like a cerulean, maybe a cobalt, maybe they be calling it that. There's a little grittiness in what I think is the ultramarine, not much. All of the paints have a bit of, you can tell that there's a filler in it, let me say it like that. Especially once you start to layer them on in a thicker consistency. Now, watered down for like a first layer, or for here, as you can see, like the first wash and a swatch, they didn't have any opaqueness at all. I feel like they were pretty transparent. And I didn't use black line here to test the transparency. And that's honestly because I did a composition with the paints before I actually swatched them. So I kind of had a general idea going into swatching them, how the transparency played out already. So I didn't put down that black line. Again, I want to say the paints are more semi-transparent than transparent. They're not the most opaque paint that I've ever used, but they're definitely not transparent. Some of them maybe, but overall, I think it's more of a semi-transparent palette. There's a lot of colors in it. So there's a lot of convenience colors in it. You do not have to do a lot of color mixing. That makes the palette really good for like beginner painters. But there are colors in it that I believe would serve as primaries in case you were someone who wanted to limit your color palette and do your own color mixing, as I did in a case over here when I was actually testing the colors to see if they would mix cleanly, if they would mud up, give me some grittiness, sort of like that palette we reviewed on, what was it, the DDD Praise, that palette that was the first one out the gate for the Temu Art series. If you guys remember the grittiness that you could see in the paint, I didn't experience any of that with these. However, you can tell that there's they're not chalky, but maybe there's like a white added to some of the paints. They're just not as, I don't feel that they're as transparent as they should be. But that's not to knock any of the great qualities that they have, because honestly, I do feel like this is a pretty decent palette of paints. I did color mixing, a salt test, and we're gonna do the lift test really quickly here. And I'm going to go ahead and try to get this wrapped on up. So I'll just, let's see, with the brush, and we'll scrub there. And let me grab a paper towel. We're gonna lift that up. And see, they lift. They lift. I didn't have any problem with them lifting. I didn't have any problem with them glazing. Now, you will have some colors that are going to stain, and I believe that's because they're not using colors that have granulation, colors like cobalts and cadmiums. So that's going to give them, more of a dye stretcher, or so to speak. So they may be more prone to stain, especially when you start talking about your reds and your purples. Most of my paintings are kind of landscape, earth-basy. So unless I'm doing like a still life or a flower, I don't tend to use a lot of the brighter colors unless it's like an orange or a yellow. A lot of those warmer colors like that. But I do use them enough in order to be able to offer a cohesive review, I believe. All right, so they reacted really, really well to salt. I really love some of the colors that I was able to mix from just using like 3 or 4 colors from this entire set, which lets you know that it's a pretty universal set. Let's take a look at some of the things that I did with them real quick, and then we're going to compare them super quickly to some other Miya Hemi products, and then we'll let Winsor & Newton make a brief feature interjection. So I think this was the painting that I did out the gate when I opened them, because the story is when I initially opened these paints, which was about 2 months ago, I thought I didn't like them. So I put the palette to the side and moved on to another palette, and I don't know, I was playing around the studio one day and I said, let me try these paints again. And I was like, okay, I don't know what I was going through. Maybe it was my mood that day that affected it, but I definitely do like the paints. And I really like the way that this came out. It was really simple, straightforward, just to kind of give the paints a test run out the gate. It helped me understand how they would perform on watercolor paper, because this is, I want to say, the Miya Hemi 100% cotton watercolor paper. They're really saturated and bright. I love the pigment payoff for these, and I really hope that they restock these because I think that they are a really good value. Now, I've heard people compare them to Winsor and Newton Cotman, and I will honestly say I do see why they say that, because I can definitely see the similarities. But just because they're similar doesn't mean they're the same paint. And I think that's where a lot of people get reviews confused. I do suggest that you look at a lot of reviews, listen to a lot of different artists from a lot of different walks of life, especially if it's going to, you know, play into the type of painting that you do. But know that when an artist is giving a review and they offer their opinion, it's never definite that that's what it is. Although there are some people who've been in this art industry so long that they can sniff paints out, like Lindsay, the frugal crafter. I mean, I think she has a wonderful gift for being able to correlate paints to each other, and you know, so there are people who can do it. But on an average basis, I am one who like to believe just because a paint holds similarities doesn't necessarily mean that they're the same paints. In some cases they are, but not all the time. Now, I think that these paints re-wet a lot better than the Cotman paints do. And my personal opinion is that they have a higher pigment load payoff than Cotman do. And that's not knocking Cotman, because I like Cotman, but I actually like these better than Cotman. And that's just my personal opinion, guys. Please do not persecute me in the comments for anything I just said. That's just my personal opinion. So I did this landscape. Speaking of Lindsay the Frugal Crafter, shout out to her. In this video, I was talking about how she inspired me to do this painting because I wanted to try doing mountains in a different way than I normally do them. This was one of the paintings that she did on her channel, and I just gravitated to it because I really liked the way she used her colors. It was doing Pride Month. I wanted to do rainbows. Everything just fit the bill. So I gave it a try, and this is what came out. This is on the channel. I will link it in case anybody wants to see it. All right, so in here, really quickly, in this particular painting, I was able again to experience that the paints layer really well, lift really well. The colors are really bright and vibrant. You don't get any breaks in the saturation. There's not a huge shift from wet to dry at all. They hold their vibrancy really, really well. Now, they do look a lot like, in all honesty, Phoenix or maybe Winsor and Newton Cotman. They perform really similarly to them, so I understand again why people think that maybe this is Cotman's formula. But I just think that these are brighter. I do. I think that these are brighter. I don't know, maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me, guys. So with that being said, when you compare them to the other Miya products, I think that they are probably the best product from Miya that I've experienced, other than their 100% watercolor paper. Now, this was the Miya Hemi watercolor 36 color square set. If you guys remember, I did this review in a art kit video. It was this particular palette. I always try to distinguish it by saying it has the comic strip on the front of it. Now, this palette of paints, again, really vibrant, really beautiful. I actually liked them when I first reviewed them. The problem is afterwards, after they had a chance to dry for a day or two, they cracked really, 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 really bad. So I would re-wet them and rework them, and then they would dry again and crack really, really, really bad. I just didn't want to deal with it, so I took those paints out. That's why I don't have the bottom. It's being cleaned so that I can use some other paints in this palette, because I actually do like the palette. I think it was pretty fun. So I don't necessarily recommend this set, but I do recommend this set if it ever becomes available again. Ironically enough, this set is still available if you can put up with cracking paints. You know what I'm saying? Know that neither set is really super light fast at all. And that is information that I sourced from Kimberly Crick, who, as I always say, does extensive light testing. You can always go to her blog page. Just Google her name, Kimberly Crick, it'll pop up. And you can see different light fast testings on these particular paints. This one, I'm going to include in the video so that you guys will be able to see the difference of what the paints look like after a year, one side being regular, one side being exposed to sunlight. And you're going to see that your cooler colors, I believe, hold more value and more light than your warmer colors do in that particular chart. They're going to be your more fugitive colors are going to be your purples and your pinks, your rosy colors, if I'm not mistaken, and I would assume it would be the same for this one if you decided to get it. So just know that this one is still available if you can put up with cracking paints, but you get a really cute palette that you can reuse if you want to, and it's 15 bucks or less if you catch it on the right day. So there you have it, guys. And then I also did this little test painting when I first, you know, start playing around with all this. Again, they perform really well. They really do perform really well. They, again, Cotman, you know, at a cheaper price, but I think they're more vibrant. I do. So if you want that Cotman quality, yeah, there's a better comparison. If you want the Cotman quality, that's a better way to say it. But with my belief of a brighter paint, if they ever become available, it may be something you want to invest in, or you may be able to source them on sites like maybe eBay, maybe finding them at like any Facebook marketplace, Let Go or Offer Up, which one of them ever still exists, Craigslist, any place where you're gonna find, like, you know, Use Our Supplies, Etsy, you may be able to find the palette. So there you have it, guys. I definitely recommend them. I hope you guys find something helpful in this video. If you did, please go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Let me know if you have this palette. What do you think of it? I definitely suggest that this is one that you hang on to, because it's a really cute novelty palette, and there's some really decent paints, I believe. I'm going to continue to use them. This is going to be one that I do not give away in this cleaning that I'm doing of my art studio. So share the video. Remember that sharing is caring. Maybe someone else out there would like to know the information on this particular palette. You can check out the video description for the links to the Facebook group where we do all things artsy and crafty, the most recommended product list, where you're going to get good quality products, I believe, that are budget friendly to your pocket. And then there's also a link to the Etsy shop where if and when you decide to support the channel, you can always go there to check out things that are on the site. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And remember, as I tell you at the end of every single video, just keep painting and crafting.